drop it low, yeah. Drop it low, yeah. Shorty wanna drop it low. Drop it low, yeah. Drop it low, yeah. Drop it low, yeah. Shorty wanna drop it low. Drop it, 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 drop it low, yeah. I'ma talk jump, but these other girls pretty. What I see in you, girl, I see up in the semi. You don't like him cause your man's so timid. You like me cause I pull up and I hit it.
And, pardon me, my top 10 rankings for the Major League Baseball fantasy football season. Of course, what's happening? Ryan Thomas here. Sorry if there were any mic issues at the beginning of the podcast. My apologies. Got to turn that on before I hit record. That's key to any show. Hit record and make sure your mic is on. Rookie mistake on my part. But in this episode, of course, I'm going to be talking about the top 10 fantasy baseball starting pitchers that you need to go after for your fantasy football draft. It is the season. 'Tis the season. We're getting closer and closer to baseball season. And, you know, I've been talking about it all week long. I've been talking about how I wanted to put together a rankings list, a top 10 rankings list, of course, at each position for fantasy baseball. Starting pitchers, of course, catchers, first baseman, you name it. So, breaking news here, all week long for this whole week, whether it's March 5th, the 6th, the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, I'll be bringing you guys all of my top 10 rankings for every position related to your fantasy baseball team. That way you guys can stay as informed as you need to be for your fantasy football drafts, or pardon me, fantasy baseball drafts coming up. Of course, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast is available on all podcasting platforms as well. You can follow me on Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take, YouTube, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast as well. The Facebook bears the same name. So, let's get into it. This is the top 10 starting pitchers for the 2023 fantasy season for your fantasy baseball team. And I'm going to start out with number 10. Number 10 being none other than a name that we should all know and love if we're a baseball fan, and that is Shohei Ohtani of the LA Angels. Now, Ohtani is one of the best power hitters that the game has to offer. He's also one of the best power pitchers, but kind of finagling that and playing the guessing game as to what the Angels are going to do with Ohtani as a pitcher is a tough guessing game for any fantasy football manager and or owner of Ohtani. And how leagues do it across the board, whether you're in an ESPN Fantasy Baseball League or a Yahoo Fantasy Baseball League or using a different platform, you might have two different versions of Shohei Ohtani in your fantasy league, where one guy drafts Shohei Ohtani as a pitcher, another guy drafts Shohei Ohtani as a batter, as a utility player to put into his lineup as a batter. My league has it that way, where there's two different versions of Shohei Ohtani. I've talked to people that work for Yahoo Fantasy, people that work for ESPN Fantasy, and they can't really give me a gauge as to how that's going to change or if it's going to change in the years to come, because Shohei Ohtani isn't going anywhere, and Shohei Ohtani has been a great pitcher as well as a great hitter, but I feel he's more of a great hitter than he is a great pitcher, which has him, atop the fantasy, baseball rankings as one of the top 5 hitters to pick. So I'm going to put him in here as my top 10 pitcher at 10 because I don't know how many starts Ohtani is going to have with the Angels in comparison to ABs that he's going to have with the Angels. It's going to be very curious to see how they are going to use Ohtani moving forward. So I have Ohtani at 10 for that reason. My next starting pitcher that is rated 9th on this top 10 list is somebody that I really like, but it's somebody that had a little bit of a down year this past year, and that is none other than Cleveland Guardians ace Shane Bieber. No relation to Justin Bieber for the folks at home. Shane Bieber had a down year, but a down year for Shane Bieber is a great year for most. I will say that. A down year for Shane Bieber, that includes 200 innings, 13 wins, and a 2.88 ERA. Obviously, you'd like to lose, you'd like to gain, rather, some more wins. He did have a shoulder impingement, made 31 starts. The year before he had that shoulder impingement, made 31 starts this past season, had 200 innings, 8th most in Major League Baseball, threw fewer four-seam fastballs and curves while upping his cutter and his slider usage as well. And there's other projections out there that showed that they believe Shane Bieber is going to have a dip in his strikeout rate, but even though he did have a dip from a couple years back to this past season, he's still ranked in the top 10 inside of strikeouts, and his walk rate was the lowest that he'd ever had. So I feel like Shane Bieber is going to have a really big year this year for the Cleveland Guardians. They should be among one of the top teams in the American League, and Shane Bieber is going to be a big reason why for that. Now, my next starting pitcher was somebody that I went after via trade due to the fact that I thought, okay, this guy is really good pitcher. He's probably one of the best pitchers of my era. He's coming off of an injury again. Let's try to get this guy on a little bit of a discount. And that guy is now on a new team, wearing a new jersey, signed a 5-year contract with the Texas Rangers, and that is Jacob deGrom. And Jake deGrom is one of the more difficult players to analyze when we talk about what he should bring forward this season for the Rangers. A completely different dynamic, completely different league from the NL to the AL, regardless of the fact that you have DHs in both leagues now. I really question what version of Jake deGrom we'll get, if any version at all, due to the fact that this guy just can't seem to stay healthy. But even Jake deGrom at his worst, 2022 statistics, he had 11 starts. He threw 64 innings. He got 5 wins and a 3.08 ERA. He took the hill just 11 times, and that stress reaction with his right scapula delayed his debut this past season until August 2nd. So the way I look at it is this: you look at those starts that deGrom had. Velocity levels were pretty high, which is a good sign. I did see less fastballs. I did see more sliders, more curveballs, trying to be a little bit more of a different pitcher rather than a power pitcher, to try to make up for the lost time and try to get that arm, healthy long term, because this guy wants to get back to where he was. But it's very tough because there is a difference in health with deGrom. This is a ranking that, based on his health, has me put him at 8th out of 10. Would very easily be the first overall pitcher off your board. Could be the very first pitcher by season's end if, in fact, he stays healthy. And the injuries do slide him down from 1 to 8 because you don't quite know what you're getting with Jake deGrom. And I feel like on draft day for your fantasy baseball team, you want to know what you're getting in a player. You want to get a guy at his peak. You don't want to get a guy that is on the downturn. And I fear that Jake deGrom could be on the downslide moving forward. The next guy that I have ranked in this top 10, the next pitcher rather, is Spencer Strider of the Atlanta Braves. I expect Spencer Strider to only get better, known as a reliever, maybe a closer option for the Braves at one point, turned starting pitcher a la former Braves pitcher John Smoltz. What a breakout campaign for Spencer Strider. I was not quick enough on the trigger to go out and get Spencer Strider on my fantasy leagues. That was done by a buddy of mine, Adam Zarpa. Shout out to him. He was able to get Spencer Strider before I was. But I have Spencer Strider ranked much higher than most. ESPN has Spencer Strider ranked 14th. USA Today has Strider ranked in the top 10. Yahoo has him ranked outside the top 10, so it varies between like 7 and 14 as to where Spencer Strider is ranked. I honestly wanted to rank him higher, given that he won the, essentially, in my eyes, should have won the NL Rookie of the Year award. He was the runner-up, but he catapulted himself into the upper echelon of fantasy starters, at least for myself and some others. But I will say, last season, towards the tail end of the season, he had that oblique scare, and that is something to keep our eyes on heading into this season. But I did feel that the fact that he did come back to the playoffs, the National League Divisional Series, we haven't heard any rumblings of a bad off season from him, with injuries that have been holding him up or anything like that. I feel like this guy is the next real big deal ace in the National League. 24 years old, plenty of years ahead of him, and a pitcher that I really like, and a pitcher that I think is going to have some longevity in this league, of course, with the stuff that he's got. The fastball-slider combination is just as good as anyone. Now, the next pitcher that I have inside my top 10 fantasy baseball rankings is Brandon Woodruff, and this is an interesting one because Woodruff had a down year due to the injuries that he had. He hit the injured list with a high ankle sprain in late May, and it was later revealed that he was experiencing Raynaud syndrome, which was causing numbness in the middle of his three fingers on his right pitching hand, of course. And despite that, he was still able to take the ball 27 times for the Milwaukee Brewers. He went 13-4 with a 3.05 ERA and a 107 WHIP across 153.1 innings rather. And among pitchers with at least 150 innings, Woodruff's strikeout percentage ranked fourth. I feel like you have to look at Woodruff as a per inning starter in comparison to everybody else, and you would see that per innings, Brandon Woodruff is one of the better starters in baseball. As long as he stays healthy, this is another guy that I expect more stats, more starts, more innings, and more wins and more strikeouts, and potentially an even lower ERA than what he pitched last season with a 3.05 ERA. We could see something lower than that. I really like Woodruff a lot. There were some rumblings that he could be traded by the Brewers as the Brewers are trying to get some more bats in their lineup. I feel like that'd be a mistake by Milwaukee to give up on this guy now. Especially when you have Corbin Burnes and Woodruff. We'll talk about Corbin Burnes throughout the show as well. I have basically a one-way instance with that. So here we go. We'll get to that a little bit later. All right. So Brandon Woodruff, 6th. And in case you're just tuning in, I do see some people on here. You got Shohei Ohtani, Shane Bieber, Jacob deGrom, Spencer Strider, Brandon Woodruff as well. The 5th pitcher on this list is none other than Aaron Nola of the Philadelphia Phillies. I knew that Aaron Nola was going to be a stud as soon as he burst onto the scene. Watching him, just in light relief work for the Phillies originally before he made his way to the starting rotation. You really look at the last few years, I think this is the most underrated pitcher in Major League Baseball. He's only made one All-Star team in his 8-year career. Hasn't had a winning record since 2019, but he should be considered among one of the top pitchers on the board. And the strikeout rate, 8 strikeouts for every 1 walk that he had in 2022, which is the best K to walk rate among qualified starters. The defensive issues figure to be a reason why he is not looked at as fondly, but what pitcher are you drafting on your fantasy baseball team for their defense anyway? And I feel like Aaron Nola could finish potentially in the Cy Young conversation with the Philadelphia Phillies, of course, making the World Series last year. I expect them to be really good again. They're only going to be better. They got one of the best players in the game in Trey Turner added into that lineup, reunited with Bryce Harper. I'm really excited for the fighting city of Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Phillies. So, number 4, I have the next pitcher on this list, and that is Max Scherzer of the New York Mets. I do believe that Max Scherzer is a pretty happy guy pitching in the big city of New York. This is a good year 2 analysis, will Max Scherzer have somewhat of a sophomore slump with the New York Mets? I don't think so, because this guy is going to be in Cooperstown one day. I truly believe that. His debut season with the Mets was everything that you could ask for when he was on the mound. Again, this is another pitcher. He's 38, 39, getting a little older. He had 2 separate oblique injuries last season, and he was out for 2 months, but that was really the only blemish on his season last year. He won 11 of his 23 starts, struck out 30% of the batters that he faced for the 8th straight year. 200 innings is the norm for Scherzer usually. I think he'll get closer to 170, 180. But he hasn't eclipsed 180 in the past 3 years, as he is aging, of course, as I mentioned. So I think that the Mets are going to manage his workload. There is a reason why I do believe the Mets could implement a 6-man rotation, not only because they're that deep, but it's going to help the longevity of Max Scherzer as well as Justin Verlander, who I do have on this list. I want to mention, too, as well, that this list is a top 10. But as I mentioned, there's 2 guys that I feel vie for that number 1 spot, and I'm going to put them in a deadlock tie among the 2 of them. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But to me, I couldn't pick one over the other, and I couldn't leave out Shohei Ohtani from this list, so bear with me on that. Max Scherzer, number 4. Number 3, his teammate, his new teammate, his teammate once again, Justin Verlander. I feel like Verlander is about to do big things with the Mets. This is another man that will be in Cooperstown at some point. I really felt truly just mind blown that Verlander and Scherzer are reuniting, and that's just one of the best storylines to me in Major League Baseball this year. This is a big deal, though, transitioning from the Astros to the Mets. I do feel like that there is a big difference between the NL and the AL still. You know, there's power pitchers in the AL. Will Verlander's quote-unquote stuff translate? If anyone's stuff will translate, it's Justin Verlander. This guy has been rock steady for the last 15, 20 years, and I'm really excited for him, and I'm excited for the Mets that they were able to make this happen. 2-year contract, $86 million. He's 40. This is the end of the road. This is the last dance for Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer to finally get a ring together. Maybe not the last dance, but the second to last dance, as Verlander, as I mentioned, is on a 2-year deal. I expect big things from the Mets this season. I expect big things from Verlander, from Scherzer. That's why I got those guys ranked 3rd and 4th, respectively, on my list of top 10 starting fantasy baseball pitchers. Number 2 is Gerrit Cole, who I do believe is probably one of the more overrated pitchers in Major League Baseball. And no, it's not because I'm a Yankees hater. No, it's not because I'm a Red Sox fan. But based on where he's been picked these last few years, I don't think he's given the return that warrants that consideration of him being, the top pitcher in fantasy baseball. But I do feel better things from him are to come. He's going to be more accustomed to being a Yankee. He's in, his 3rd year upcoming as a New York Yankee, maybe his 4th. And I do think that the addition of Carlos Rodon to the Yankees rotation is actually going to take a lot of pressure off of Gerrit Cole. For the first few years of Cole in New York, he didn't necessarily have the number 2 behind him that was as effective as he needs. And that's something that goes back to his time in Houston, goes back to his time, of course, in Pittsburgh. He always had a decent number 2 guy behind him that could kind of take pressure off of him, even in Pittsburgh, more so in Pittsburgh than he has with the Yankees. And I really feel like the addition of Carlos Rodon is going to kind of take a little bit of pressure off of Gerrit Cole and allow him to kind of just sit back and kind of play with more of a relaxed with more of a relaxed mindset, which could mean that a 20-game season could be on the horizon for Gerrit Cole with the New York Yankees. So number 1 on this list, as I mentioned, I couldn't pick one guy as the number 1. There's 2 guys that I feel really qualify for this role, and I had to pick 2 pitchers for this role because I didn't want to, avoid including Shohei Ohtani. I felt like he needed to be in there as the 10th best, essentially the 11th best according to this ranking. But there's two pitchers that I have that could be the number one pitcher off the board, and I can't make the case for either one of them being second best to one another. In terms of these two pitchers, I'm going to go with the two top pitchers for you to take: Sandy Alcantara of the Miami Marlins and Corbin Burnes of the Milwaukee Brewers. And the way that I look at it is this: both of these guys, you can't go wrong. Corbin Burnes has had 3 straight phenomenal seasons with the Milwaukee Brewers. Each one placed him among the top 9 starters in fantasy baseball. Most impressive that I feel you start to see that the volume of innings, the volume of strikeouts. 200 innings one year, 200 innings the next year, 240 strikeouts back to back. I can expect that from last season compared to this season, as well as an ERA that is around the 3s. And if Corbin Burnes is not the first pitcher taken, the only other guy that should be is Sandy Alcantara, who is pitching for the Miami Marlins, not the best team to pitch for. You're not going to come to expect 20 wins from Alcantara, but if anybody could get a win on a bad team with limited run support, it is Alcantara. And last season was like a true throwback to like the dominant years of like a Roger Clemens or a Nolan Ryan. And I don't throw those names around lightly, but just in terms of not even the talent, but due to the fact that you have a pitcher that's pitching his tail off on a really bad team that was able to scrape away, a little more than a dozen wins, 14 wins on a team that was not that good. 228 innings last year, astonishing. The most anyone had ever thrown since 2019. The strikeouts were a little low in terms of that, most innings, but 8th most strikeouts. So 7 other guys had more strikeouts than him when he threw for far more innings. I will say the objective of a pitcher is to get an out any way you can get it, and nobody did that better than Alcantara. I do feel the strikeouts could be a little bit better, but in terms of his performance last season, if you get a repeat performance of that, you're in pretty good shape. So there you have it. This is a list that I really had a lot of fun putting together. It's really great to see the amount of names that are new names on this list. The fact that Spencer Strider is on this list, the fact that Sandy Alcantara is on this list, and on this list no less at number 1, just goes to show you that there is so much talent right now in Major League Baseball, and I love talking about the new wave of pitching talent that's coming through. I really hope this helps you guys do your best for your fantasy baseball draft. Of course, all week long I'll be providing you rankings on all positions needed to help you win your fantasy baseball league. Nobody's done that better than me over the last 10 years. Won probably 7 or 8 titles across keeper leagues, redraft leagues, dynasty leagues, you name it. I greatly enjoy the state of the game of baseball right now, and these 10 pitchers are going to definitely help you win your fantasy baseball league. I'm Ryan Thomas. Thanks for tuning in.